Have you ever wondered why a man can spend an entire day consumed by thoughts of a woman, even when she has spoken only a few words, moved only with quiet grace, or left behind nothing more than the echo of her presence? Most women believe that a man thinks of her when she constantly reminds him of her existence, but the truth is far more unsettling. It is often her silence, her mystery, her absence that haunts him most. What you think pushes him away, space, restraint, the refusal to demand, may actually be what draws him closer. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious responds not to force but to symbol, and in relationships, it is often the subtle, the unspoken, the archetypal energy of a woman that weaves itself into the depths of a man's psyche. In every dynamic between man and woman, there is a silent dialogue taking place beneath the surface of words. The masculine mind, forged in logic and conquest, finds itself inexplicably captivated by that which it cannot fully grasp. A woman who radiates a sense of inner sovereignty, who does not flood the air with her need but instead carries herself as if she already belongs to something greater, becomes the mystery that refuses to be solved. He begins to turn her over in his thoughts, again and again, attempting to decode her silence, to find an answer where none has been given. This is not manipulation, it is archetypal psychology at play. The anima, the feminine within his unconscious, awakens in her presence and forces him to wrestle with himself. Imagine this: he walks through his day, conversations swirling, tasks demanding his focus, yet behind it all there is a soft echo of her. Not because she clung, not because she demanded, but because she planted something deeper. The forbidden psychology lies in the paradox that the less she gives, the more he supplies with his own imagination. Every unanswered question becomes a spark. Every subtle gesture, a glance, a tone, a half-smile, etches itself into his mind with more force than hours of endless chatter. He cannot resolve her. And it is the unresolved that men cannot resist thinking about. Women often fall into the trap of believing that to be unforgettable they must impress, perform, overexpose. Yet it is not performance that imprints itself upon the male unconscious, it is enigma. Jung spoke of projection, how a man casts his unmet needs, his shadowed desires, onto the figure of a woman. If she is too transparent, too eager to clarify, the projection collapses. But if she holds space for his mind to wander, she becomes the canvas upon which he paints his longings. In this way, her power is not in what she explains but in what she leaves unsaid. The gaps in her presence become filled with his energy, not hers. This is why the woman who knows how to be still, how to cultivate her own inner world without broadcasting every thought, is the one who lingers in a man's consciousness. Her worth is not dependent on his acknowledgement, and that independence creates a gravitational pull. She becomes like a mirror he cannot look away from, not because she reflects him perfectly, but because she reflects what he cannot yet reconcile within himself. He is compelled to return, mentally, to the place where her mystery resides. The more he tries to categorize her, the more elusive she becomes. And in that elusiveness, desire breeds. If you have ever wondered why some women are unforgettable while others fade quickly from memory, the answer lies here. It is not beauty alone, not availability, not even kindness that ensures she occupies his thoughts, it is the rare ability to awaken his unconscious, to embody what he cannot fully control or consume. The forbidden psychology of making him think of you all day is not about force, it is about resonance. It is about becoming an archetype rather than a role, a symbol rather than a possession. In doing so, you shift from the ordinary into the mythic, and once you dwell in that realm, you will find that he cannot stop circling your presence, again and again, even when you are not there. There is a rhythm to attraction that most never notice. Like the moon drawing tides in silence, unseen yet undeniable, a woman's presence can stir the hidden waters of a man's psyche long after she has walked away. When she understands this rhythm, she no longer feels the need to push or pull, she simply allows the gravitational field of her essence to do what force never can. The secret is that he does not think of her because she demands his mind, he thinks of her because her image slips into the symbolic language of his unconscious, where logic falters and archetypes reign. Jung knew this realm well, the place where myths, symbols, and dreams take shape, and it is here that a man wrestles with her even when his waking mind denies it. The mind of a man is not captivated by constant availability but by the impression of something just beyond reach. He may desire control, but true captivation lies in the ungraspable. The woman who lives fully in her own inner world, who nurtures her individuality, her passions, and her silence, carries an aura of unclaimed territory. She is not an empty vessel waiting to be filled but a sovereign landscape of her own. And this sovereignty unsettles him. It challenges the part of his psyche that craves dominance, because here is a woman he cannot conquer, only experience. She becomes less a person in his mind and more a force of nature, like fire, like storm, like twilight, never fully contained, only encountered. To think of her is to confront the limits of his power. And this confrontation awakens something primal. The anima within him, the inner feminine he has suppressed or misunderstood, stirs restlessly, urging him toward her image as if it were a map leading him home. He may not consciously realize it, but she embodies qualities he both craves and fears. Tenderness and strength. Mystery and clarity. Distance and intimacy. She unsettles the dualities he thought were fixed, and so he circles her endlessly, trying to reconcile the contradiction she represents. His logic tells him to move on, yet his unconscious refuses, returning to her again and again like a refrain he cannot escape. Consider the way memory itself functions. The mind does not replay entire conversations but fragments, tones, images, gestures. The way her hand lingered on a glass, the cadence of her voice when she spoke of something that mattered, the unguarded expression that flickered when she fell into silence. These fragments become symbols, alive in his inner theater, playing out scenes where she is both herself and something more. She becomes mythologized not because she tried to impress, but because she allowed space for imagination to elevate her beyond the ordinary. The less she explains herself, the more meaning he ascribes to her. And in this meaning, she becomes unforgettable. But here lies the forbidden truth. The power is not about manipulating him, but about embodying herself so fully that she no longer seeks to be understood. When a woman clings to explanation, to proof of worth, to constant reassurance, she collapses into the mundane. But when she surrenders the need to be grasped, she rises into the archetypal. She ceases to be a character in his story and becomes the very story he cannot stop reading. He begins to think of her not because she asks to be remembered, but because she represents the part of him that longs to awaken. And in that sense, she is no longer merely a woman in his life, she is the threshold to his own inner transformation. The paradox is complete. What makes him think of her endlessly is not her pursuit, but her refusal to abandon herself. She holds her ground, and in holding it, she becomes the ground he cannot stop returning to. He may not even realize why his thoughts drift back to her in moments of silence, in the spaces between distractions. But the truth is simple, she has entered his unconscious, and once there, she cannot easily be erased. Desire, when viewed through the lens of Jungian depth psychology, is not a surface-level impulse but a mirror of the unconscious itself. A man does not think endlessly of the woman who is always available, predictable, and fully revealed. His mind drifts toward the one who embodies paradox, who lives as both mirror and mystery. She unsettles him because she awakens what he has buried. She does not soothe his every insecurity, nor does she rage for his constant validation. Instead, she exists as a reminder that the feminine is not something to be consumed but something to be contemplated, revered, and endlessly sought. This is why the archetype of the muse has endured across centuries of art, poetry, and myth. The muse is not adored because she lays bare every detail of her soul. She is adored because she awakens dormant parts of the artist, forcing him to wrestle with himself in her reflection. The same dynamic unfolds in modern relationships. A man thinks about a woman all day not because she has filled every silence with her voice, but because she has left enough silence for his unconscious to speak. She becomes the stage upon which his own desires, fears, and longings are projected, and that stage is far more captivating than any explanation could ever be. Yet women often misunderstand this forbidden current. Conditioned by a culture of instant validation and constant exposure, many believe that the louder they declare their presence, the harder they press for attention, the more they will be remembered. But this creates only exhaustion, a fleeting impression that vanishes as quickly as it appears. What lingers is what cannot be resolved. The woman who cultivates mystery through her sovereignty, who withholds not out of manipulation but out of natural self-possession, creates an aura that does not dissipate. He cannot close the loop because she has not allowed herself to be reduced into a solved equation. And so he returns to her image, again and again, each time finding new fragments of meaning within the space she has left unclaimed. Imagine him walking through a crowded room, faces and voices blurring into sameness. Yet the memory of her remains distinct, sharper than reality itself. He recalls not only what she said, but the weight beneath her words. He remembers not just her beauty, but the calm with which she carried it. He replays not merely her presence, but the aftertaste of her absence. In Jungian terms, she has entered his symbolic imagination. She has become part of the dreamscape he cannot control, and there is no escape from what the unconscious insists on confronting. This does not mean that a woman should play games, withholding affection to provoke obsession. Games are rooted in fear, and fear is transparent. What endures is authenticity, the authentic mystery of a woman who is whole in herself, who has no need to explain her worth. He thinks of her not because she twisted his emotions, but because she awakened his archetypal hunger. In her presence, he confronts the anima within himself. In her sovereignty, he confronts his own lack of wholeness. This is the essence of attraction as alchemy. She stirs what he has neglected, and he is compelled to face it, even if he cannot name it. So when you wonder why he cannot stop thinking of you, the answer is rarely found in what you said or did explicitly. It is in what you embodied. Did you embody need, or did you embody depth? Did you flood his senses with noise, or did you plant symbols that now bloom in the silence of his mind? These are the questions that divide the fleeting from the unforgettable. For the woman who understands her own archetypal power becomes more than a passing figure in his life, she becomes a haunting presence in his unconscious, one he cannot set aside no matter how hard he tries. The deeper truth of this forbidden psychology is that a man's thoughts do not circle endlessly around the ordinary, they orbit the extraordinary. And what is extraordinary is not perfection, nor is it flawless beauty. It is depth. It is contrast. It is the sense that beneath her words lies an ocean that cannot be drained. The woman who evokes this is not the loudest in the room, not the one clamoring for constant affirmation, but the one who carries an invisible gravity, a weight that pulls at his attention long after she has left his sight. He feels her absence as acutely as her presence, and this paradox is what makes her unforgettable. In Jungian terms, she has stepped into the role of the archetype. She becomes less of a mere individual and more of a symbolic figure that his psyche cannot ignore. To him, she embodies mystery, allure, and the gateway to something beyond himself. And this embodiment does not come from pretending or playing roles. It comes from her alignment with her own unconscious, from her willingness to embrace both her light and her shadow. A woman who has walked into the depths of her own being, who has faced her fears and transmuted them into strength, carries a magnetism that cannot be faked. He feels it, though he cannot explain it. She unsettles him because she does not flatter his illusions, she calls his unconscious forward. Consider the way she listens. Not rushing to fill silence, not bending herself into the shape of his expectations. She listens with presence, but without surrendering her boundaries. That silence is not emptiness, it is a mirror. And when he looks into it, he sees himself more clearly than he wishes to. He sees the parts of himself he has avoided, the wounds he has ignored, the longings he has repressed. And because she does not rescue him from that discomfort, because she does not try to manage or soothe every fracture, he begins to associate her with transformation. She becomes the key to a door he has not dared to open, and once that association is forged, she lingers in his mind as both challenge and invitation. The modern man may not speak in these terms, but his behavior reveals the truth. He may try to distract himself with work, with friends, with the noise of his daily routine, yet in quiet moments her image returns. Not because she demanded his devotion, but because she stirred the unconscious tides within him. He dreams of her, imagines conversations that never happened, replays fragments of her gestures. She has become the unresolved equation, the symbol without a clear interpretation. And the psyche, restless by nature, cannot leave symbols unresolved. It circles them until meaning emerges. She does not chase his thoughts chase her. But there is danger here, too, for the woman who misinterprets this power. If she mistakes sovereignty for coldness, or mystery for manipulation, the spell breaks. What he longs for is not cruelty, but authenticity. The woman who truly enters his unconscious is the one who stands firmly in herself, not to test him, not to torment him, but simply because she knows no other way to live. Her refusal to collapse into neediness or performance is what sets her apart. And so he keeps thinking of her, not as a puzzle designed to trap him, but as an enigma that awakens him. She is both absence and presence, wound and salve, mirror and flame. In her, he finds both his longing and his undoing. This is why some women are remembered for years, even decades, while others fade like smoke. It is not time spent together, nor words exchanged, but the archetypal resonance left behind. He cannot escape it, because it was never about her actions alone, it was about the way she became a symbol in his inner world. And once that symbol takes root, she is no longer just a woman to him, she is a myth he cannot release. Every man carries within him a silent hunger, a yearning not merely for companionship, but for meaning. He may not name it as such, for modern language reduces desire to surface attraction, to physical chemistry, to fleeting attention. Yet beneath the veil of appearances lies the truth. When he cannot stop thinking of a woman, it is not her body that haunts him, but her essence. She has become the embodiment of something his unconscious has been searching for, perhaps without his knowledge. She is no longer just herself, she is the vessel of a forgotten truth, an image that bridges him back to the depths of his own soul. Carl Jung spoke often of the anima, the feminine archetype within every man, that mysterious energy urging him toward integration. A man resists it, fearing vulnerability, fearing surrender, yet he cannot live without it. And when he encounters a woman who stirs this archetype into motion, she becomes unforgettable. It is not because she flatters him, nor because she bends herself into his desires, it is because she awakens something ancient. Her presence calls him toward the reconciliation of opposites, logic with intuition, control with surrender, strength with tenderness. She becomes the mirror of what he has yet to reconcile, and this mirror cannot easily be set aside. Think of the way the unconscious works. It thrives not on clarity, but on symbols. A half smile, a gaze that lingers a moment longer than expected, a silence that speaks more loudly than words, these are not random gestures. They are symbols, and once they are lodged in the unconscious, they acquire a life of their own. A man may try to dismiss them, but they return at night in dreams, in daydreams, in stray thoughts that pull him away from routine. This is the forbidden psychology. She does not dominate his thoughts by demanding them, but by leaving traces he cannot erase. She leaves symbols rather than explanations, and symbols grow into myths. The danger for many women is in believing that they must constantly explain themselves, that they must prove and reprove their worth. But explanation collapses mystery. Once something is fully defined, the unconscious ceases to wrestle with it. To hold his attention, one must hold the tension of paradox, intimacy without exposure, presence without saturation. This is not about withholding for the sake of manipulation, it is about living so deeply in one's own truth that she refuses to flatten herself for his comfort. And it is precisely this depth that draws him back, again and again, even against his own will. Imagine him sitting alone, the world momentarily quiet. His mind should drift toward rest, yet it does not. Instead, it replays her, the way she carried herself, the words she left unsaid, the way her energy unsettled his certainty. He tells himself it is irrational, but he cannot resist. For she has entered the archetypal realm, and in that realm, she is not simply a woman but a symbol of what he most fears and most longs for. She is the siren and the sanctuary, the question and the answer. He cannot control the thought of her because she represents what he has not yet mastered within himself. This is why he thinks of her all day. Not because she demanded, not because she clung, not because she performed, but because she embodied. She embodied a truth larger than both of them, and in doing so, she revealed the smallness of his own self-constructed certainty. To forget her would mean to forget himself, and so the unconscious resists. He may deny it, but the truth is simple, she has become woven into the very fabric of his inner world. And once that weaving has begun, it is nearly impossible to unravel. There is a subtle cruelty in the way memory works. It does not ask permission, nor does it obey reason. A man cannot decide which images will fade and which will remain, etched with burning clarity into the folds of his mind. And when a woman has touched not only his senses but his unconscious, her presence becomes more than memory, it becomes haunting. She follows him, not in body, but in the invisible corridors of thought. He hears her voice in the pauses of his day, sees her outline in the shadows of the ordinary, feels her absence like an echo in a hollow room. This is not obsession born of desperation. It is the psychological pull of archetypal energy, the gravity of something larger than logic. Jung understood that what is unresolved continues to return. A man will not circle endlessly around what he fully comprehends, he will move on once the meaning is exhausted. But when a woman embodies paradox, when she refuses to flatten herself into complete legibility, she creates a living question mark within him. He does not know why he remembers the slight tilt of her head, or why her laughter comes back to him at night when silence should bring peace. He only knows that he cannot dismiss it. Her presence has unsettled his carefully drawn boundaries, and the psyche cannot rest until it resolves what it cannot explain. Yet paradoxically, it never fully resolves. That is why she lingers. The women who disappear from a man's mind are often those who sought too hard to be remembered. They performed, they reached, they explained, and in so doing, they stripped themselves of the sacred tension between concealment and revelation. The women who remain unforgettable are those who allowed him to wonder, who allowed him to project, who allowed his unconscious to work tirelessly in the dark. This is not a game, nor a manipulation, it is the natural consequence of her sovereignty. She does not chase, she does not demand clarity, she does not fear his uncertainty. She holds herself as mystery, not because she tries to be mysterious, but because she is deeply rooted in her own inner life, which no man can fully possess. And so his thoughts wander back to her, drawn like a moth to flame, even when he resists. He thinks of her when he is victorious, wondering what she would see in his triumph. He thinks of her in defeat, imagining how her silence would reflect his weakness back to him. He thinks of her when he is surrounded by others, comparing the superficial noise of the crowd to the depth she carried in stillness. She has become a benchmark of sorts, a symbol against which he measures his own experience. The truth is that he is not merely thinking of her, he is wrestling with himself through her image. This is the forbidden nature of it. She does not occupy his mind because of who she is alone, but because of what she evokes within him. She awakens his anima, stirs his shadow, challenges his ego. He remembers her not because she told him to, but because forgetting her would mean ignoring the unfinished business within his own soul. And so she remains, living rent-free not by demand but by resonance. Here lies the paradox every woman must understand: to be unforgettable, one must not strive to be unforgettable. To linger in his thoughts, one must not chase his attention. It is her very refusal to collapse into need that grants her the power to be everywhere without being present. She is both absence and presence, wound and balm, question and riddle. And he, helpless to resist, becomes her unwilling devotee, not because she bound him, but because his own psyche refuses to let her go. In every era, men have written poems, carved statues, composed symphonies, all in an attempt to immortalize a woman who lived as more than flesh. These women became archetypes, eternal reminders of what could not be possessed yet could never be forgotten. It was never simply their beauty, nor their proximity, but the way they awakened something ungovernable in the male psyche. To think of them was to touch eternity, to confront a longing that could not be satisfied by mere ownership. This is the forbidden psychology at its core. The woman who compels endless thought is not the one who bends herself to a man's expectations, but the one who remains aligned with her own essence. A man is both frightened and fascinated by what he cannot control. His ego thrives on predictability, on knowing where he stands, on conquering and categorizing. Yet when he encounters a woman who cannot be reduced to a role, he is disarmed. She is not the girlfriend, the conquest, or the trophy. She exists beyond the labels he tries to place upon her. She is sovereign, whole, self-contained. And it is this wholeness that unsettles him most. She requires nothing from him, yet she stirs everything within him. He does not think of her because she asks for his attention, he thinks of her because she reveals to him how little command he truly has over his own inner world. This is why the woman who embraces her shadow as much as her light is the one who leaves the deepest imprint. The shadow is not darkness to be feared, it is the hidden, the unspoken, the parts of self that polite society urges us to conceal. When a woman has done her inner work, when she is unafraid of her own depths, she emanates a subtle power. She becomes magnetic, not through effort, but through presence. He senses that she is not naive to suffering, nor is she fragile before life's chaos. She is both softness and steel. And because she does not fear her own contradictions, she forces him to confront his. Imagine him lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying her silence more than her words. It is not what she said that disturbs him most, but what she left unsaid. The spaces in her being become fertile ground for his imagination. He wonders what she hides, what she dreams, what truths she carries that he cannot reach. Each thought sends him deeper, until she becomes less of a person and more of a myth, stitched into his unconscious like a riddle. This is why he cannot stop thinking of her, she has become the embodiment of something his psyche longs for but cannot master. Many women, fearing abandonment, attempt to fill these silences with explanations, reassurances, proofs of love. But in doing so, they strip themselves of the very mystery that holds a man's attention. Mystery is not absence of love, it is the breath that keeps desire alive. A woman who gives herself entirely away, who erases her edges for the comfort of another, becomes forgettable, not because she lacks worth, but because she leaves nothing for the unconscious to wrestle with. But the woman who remains whole, who allows gaps, who resists the temptation to collapse into predictability, she becomes the fire that lingers in his thoughts long after she is gone. He does not merely remember her. He returns to her in imagination, again and again, as if his psyche requires her to advance its own journey. She is not a possession but a portal, not a role but a revelation. And so he cannot stop circling her image, because within her, he glimpses both his greatest fear and his deepest longing. To forget her would mean to abandon his own path toward wholeness. There is a reason that the most powerful women in history were often described as dangerous, enigmatic, even forbidden. Men spoke of them not merely as lovers but as forces, women who lingered in thought long after their presence had passed. Cleopatra, Helena, Guinevere, countless others, their allure was not born of surface charm alone, but of an archetypal depth that unsettled the men who encountered them. They embodied paradox. They could inspire worship and fear in the same breath. They were unforgettable precisely because they did not seek to be consumed, they demanded to be contemplated. This is the essence of making a man think of you without effort. You cease to be a detail in his day and become a landscape within his mind. When a woman embraces her own depth, she shifts the dynamic of attraction from surface to soul. She becomes less of an object of desire and more of a catalyst of transformation. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the unconscious. A man may believe he is captivated by her alone, but the truth is harsher. He is captivated by the parts of himself she awakens. She is the symbol through which his unconscious demands attention. He thinks of her not because she entertains him, but because she unsettles him, forcing him to question the limits of who he is. Consider the moments that replay in his mind. Not her most carefully chosen words, not her most deliberate gestures, but the flashes of authenticity that broke through. The laughter that erupted unrestrained, the moment of stillness when her eyes revealed pain and strength intertwined, the way she left space in conversation rather than filling every silence. These are not accidents, they are gateways. Each one becomes a seed planted in the soil of his unconscious. And seeds, once planted, grow whether he wills it or not. This is why men often find themselves tormented by thoughts of a woman they could not fully claim. He may move on physically, he may surround himself with noise, but internally, the loop continues. She has become a story he cannot end. Not because she withheld out of cruelty, but because she lived in wholeness, refusing to collapse herself for his consumption. He remembers her because she is not reducible, because she is a reminder of something larger than herself. To stop thinking of her would be to betray the part of him that longs for depth, for truth, for beauty beyond the ordinary. And so his psyche clings to her image as both punishment and promise. She becomes the ache he cannot soothe, the vision that refuses to fade. He tries to rationalize it, it was just chemistry, just timing, just circumstance. But reason is powerless against archetypal resonance. He does not think of her because she fits a category, he thinks of her because she broke every category he tried to place her in. She was not simply a lover, a friend, a companion, she was all and none, a contradiction that forced him into awareness of his own incompleteness. This is why the forbidden psychology is not about strategies or tricks. It is about depth. It is about a woman becoming so aligned with her own truth, so at peace with both her shadow and her light, that she radiates a wholeness no man can consume. She holds the tension of paradox, and in doing so, she becomes the archetype he cannot release. She is unforgettable not because she sought to be unforgettable, but because she is a mirror of everything he has not yet reconciled within himself. Thus, the thought of her is not merely memory, it is initiation. It is the unconscious telling him, here lies the part of you still undiscovered. And until he listens, until he learns, she will haunt him. There is a haunting weight to the feminine that refuses to be diluted. When she no longer fears her own intensity, she begins to move through the world as an unshakable presence. This is not loudness, not provocation, it is the quiet certainty of a woman who has entered into union with her own depths. And when a man encounters such a woman, he does not merely notice her. He is pierced by her. She cuts through the noise of his life and implants herself into his unconscious, where she begins to live not as memory but as symbol. This is why he thinks of her when he least expects it. While walking into a meeting, he remembers her stillness. While sitting among friends, he feels the echo of her voice in the back of his mind. In the loneliness of night, she appears again, unbidden, carrying both comfort and disturbance. He cannot banish her because she is no longer an external presence, she has fused with his inner world. His ego may resist, his logic may argue, but the psyche does not release what it has claimed as necessary. Jung described this as the power of the unconscious to guide us toward wholeness. The woman who stirs a man endlessly is not merely an object of desire, she is a summons. She calls him, without words, into confrontation with the unlived parts of himself. She awakens his anima, his inner feminine, the neglected half of his psyche. And because the anima is not easily embraced, she unsettles him. He thinks of her because she represents both the possibility of healing and the terror of surrender. She is at once balm and wound, invitation and warning. Yet here lies the paradox every empowered woman must hold, she does not cultivate this magnetism by chasing his thoughts. She cultivates it by living her own depths, even if he never sees them. Her focus is not on being remembered, but on being whole. And it is that wholeness that leaves an indelible mark. She is not a mask crafted to ensnare, she is an essence that cannot be copied. In a world of surfaces, she is depth. In a world of noise, she is silence. In a world of grasping hands, she is untouchable. And that is why he cannot release her from his mind. The danger for men is that they mistake this pull for possession. They believe that if only they could hold her, claim her, define her, they would quiet the storm inside. But they are wrong. The moment she is flattened into ownership, the archetype dissolves, the spell is broken. What holds him is not her submission, but her sovereignty. She remains unforgettable precisely because she cannot be consumed. And though he may try to reduce her, a deeper truth gnaws at him, she is not his to own. She is his to witness, and witnessing is far more difficult than possessing. For the woman, the temptation is different. She may be tempted to soften her depth, to quiet her power, to explain herself so he feels less threatened. But every time she collapses herself for his comfort, she dims the fire that made her unforgettable. The task is not to bend, but to remain. To remain whole. To remain sovereign. To remain a living contradiction that calls forth the truth in others simply by existing as herself. This is the forbidden psychology. She does not seek to live in his mind, but because she lives fully in herself, his mind cannot escape her. And so he circles her endlessly, not because she bound him, but because she awakened him. He cannot silence the thought of her because the thought of her is not just about her, it is about himself. She is the mirror he cannot look away from, the symbol that forces him to confront what he has ignored. She is unforgettable, because forgetting her would mean forgetting the very part of himself that longs most desperately to be seen. There comes a moment when the woman who understands this forbidden psychology realizes that her power was never about him at all. It was never about bending his mind into obsession, never about forcing his thoughts to linger where she wanted them to be. It was about embodying such depth, such sovereignty, that she became impossible to forget. Not because she tried, but because she revealed a truth that stretched beyond her. She awakened the archetype within him, and once awakened, it will not sleep again. This is the irony: the man believes he is captivated by her, but in truth, he is captivated by himself in her presence. She becomes the screen onto which his unconscious projects the images of his anima, his longing for wholeness, his hunger for reconciliation between opposites. He thinks of her because she became the mirror he had avoided all his life. Her presence called out to the fractured parts of him, and the call cannot be undone. That is why she lingers. That is why she returns to him in dreams, in quiet moments, in the spaces where reason loses its grip. But what of her? Does she live only to haunt his psyche? No. The woman of depth does not anchor her identity in being remembered. She knows that the true secret is detachment, that her worth is not magnified by his endless thoughts, nor diminished if he forgets. She walks into her own wholeness, her own light, her own shadows, and in that completeness she transcends the need for validation. This is where Jung's notion of individuation meets feminine empowerment. She is not half of a story waiting to be completed by a man. She is the story, already whole, already sovereign. The final paradox emerges here: the more she releases the need to be unforgettable, the more unforgettable she becomes. For men are not haunted by women who grasp, they are haunted by women who release. They are not tormented by women who beg to be remembered, but by those who move forward with quiet certainty, embodying the rarest form of freedom, a freedom from needing to be chosen. This freedom unsettles him more than any beauty, more than any performance. He thinks of her not because she is his, but because she is not. And yet, in her release, she finds peace. For to be unforgettable is not always to be bound. The woman who has integrated her shadows, who has stepped into the fullness of her being, understands that his thoughts are his to wrestle with. She is not responsible for how his unconscious clings to her image. She has already done the work, she has become whole. His obsession is not her burden, nor her crown. It is simply the evidence of her resonance. In the end, the forbidden psychology is not a trick, not a formula, not a strategy. It is a state of being. It is the courage to walk as mystery and mirror, to be both flame and sanctuary, to stand in sovereignty without apology. And when she does, she becomes not just a woman in his story, but the threshold to his transformation. He may never name it. He may never fully understand it. But he will never forget it. And so we arrive at the ultimate truth, the one few dare to accept: the woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.